Chapter 1, The Whispering Forest. Snow fell thick and silent over the Carpathian peaks, swallowing sound and color in a shroud of pale death. Nestled in a cleft between the mountains, the village of Verasti lay under curfew, its windows shuttered, its chimneys weeping smoke into the frozen dusk. The war had not reached them with bombs but with whispers. German soldiers marched in months ago, requisitioned the monastery on the hill, and turned it into a command post. Now, only shadows moved past the tall iron gates at night, and the villagers pretended not to hear the chanting. Something ancient stirred in those stones, something the locals feared more than the SS. Magda stood barefoot in the snow, her white nightgown clinging to her curves, illuminated by moonlight as though carved from ice and desire. Her breath misted in the air, but she did not shiver. She was sleepwalking again, at least that's what she told herself each morning. Her steps led always toward the forest. The whispering started 2 weeks ago, soft and erotic, like a lover's murmur against her ear. She told no one. Not father, not even ISF, her secret lover among the resistance. Something about the voice filled her with a craving beyond reason. The trees loomed like black fingers, their limbs clotted with snow. As she passed beneath them, the air changed. Warmer despite the snow. Moister as though the forest breathed. The voice returned, velvet and male, dripping with promises. You were born from this soil, little flame. Come closer. Remember what they buried beneath the roots. She reached a clearing encircled by 6 gnarled oaks. Beneath them the snow did not stick. The earth steamed faintly, exhaling the scent of musk, blood, and flowers long extinct. Back in the village, the German captain Wilhelm Krieg paced before the monastery's sealed crypt. The door had been unearthed during renovations, a slab of black stone etched with symbols none could read. He'd lost 3 men trying to break the seal, their bodies found twisted, eyes burned from within. But Krieg was no coward. The occult fascinated him. His belief in ancient Aryan bloodlines had led him to Romania, and to this monastery rumored to rest upon pagan ruins. He ordered the priests hanged when they refused to assist. Now the crypt pulsed at night with a rhythm he claimed matched his own heartbeat. Magda woke in her bed, her feet muddy and cold. Her thighs were damp, scented with moss and something darker. She pressed her fingers to her skin and felt a jolt, pleasure and dread entwined. The whispers echoed in her mind, clearer now, coaxing her to return. But something had changed. A symbol had been burned into her left hip, an intricate spiral that shimmered when she moved. She gasped and pulled the blanket tighter, unsure if this marked her as chosen or cursed. ISF noticed the change immediately. In the candlelight of the wine cellar where they met, she seemed almost feverish, her skin glowing beneath the grime. Her kisses were hungrier. Her eyes darted to shadows. "They're awakening," she whispered between gasps, clawing at his uniform. He tried to dismiss it, thinking it was just stress or trauma, but when he saw the mark, his blood ran cold. It matched a symbol on a parchment they'd stolen from the monastery. One used in pre-Christian rites to summon the first flame. That night the forest howled. Animals screamed and no birds sang come dawn. Krieg stood in the clearing Magda had unknowingly visited, surrounded by his men. The soil smoked where her feet had touched. He recognized the signs, activation. His occult advisors murmured prayers as they began to dig. Something buried would rise, he was certain. A weapon perhaps. Or a god. He didn't care so long as it obeyed. The villagers felt the shift like a tremor in their bones. Old women crossed themselves and burned sage behind closed doors. Children cried without reason. The well water turned cloudy. Magda's father found her burning her bedsheets in the snow, eyes glassy, mouth murmuring in a dead tongue. He locked her in the attic, praying to saints whose names even he had forgotten. But no prayer could stop what had begun beneath the forest floor. Magda no longer feared the whispers. She craved them. At night, the voice came not just to her but through her. She spoke in dreams to others, women and men, drawing them slowly, seductively toward the trees. The forest grew louder with each convert, its breath thick with lust and rot. Her body changed, more lithe, more dangerous. She could feel the heartbeat of the land, of something below, something ancient and hungry. And deep beneath the monastery, behind the black stone sealed for centuries, the first flame stirred. It opened its eyes, forgotten by time, remembered only in blood. The spiral was its key and Magda its willing herald. The war above would soon be nothing more than smoke and memory, for something older than man had begun to rise. Chapter 2, Beneath the Monastery. The black stone cracked with a sound like bones splintering under pressure. Krieg watched, breathless, as his occult advisors recited the final passage from a forbidden text bound in flayed skin. The torches flickered, casting monstrous shapes on the crypt walls. From the rupture oozed not dust, but heat, wet, pulsing heat that smelled of salt and blood. Something alive slithered within. As the slab slid open, it revealed stairs winding down into a throat of utter blackness. The first flame had awakened, and its temple pulsed with forbidden life. Magda, locked in the attic, arched in her sleep, moaning as if in ecstasy. Her eyes fluttered beneath pale lids, her fingers clutching the attic floorboards with clawed tension. In her dreams she walked those stairs. She saw the ancient walls, alive with carvings that moved like serpents. The voice guided her, no longer a whisper but a choir, male and female, commanding and worshipful. Soon, flame-bearer. Soon you will be whole. Her spiral mark burned with a fiery kiss that left her gasping into the shadows. Krieg descended first, revolver drawn, though he knew it would be useless. His men followed reluctantly, each step a descent into an older world, a place untouched by Christ or Caesar. The air throbbed with low frequencies that bypassed the ear and spoke to the marrow. The staircase opened into a vast chamber, its walls lined with bones arranged in intricate mosaics. At the center, atop a stone altar slick with ancient ichor, lay a skeletal figure wreathed in flame that did not burn. The first flame. In the village, the corruption spread. Cattle were born eyeless, mewling in voices like children. The ground softened in places as if organs beat beneath the soil. A group of villagers tried to flee through the mountain pass, only to return days later, eyes hollow, smiling with broken teeth. They spoke only of warmth, of unity, of a mother waiting below. They called her the Ember Bride. And they spoke Magda's name as if it were a hymn. ISF armed himself with stolen munitions, panic driving every motion. He couldn't reach Magda, her father had barred the house, but he saw her in his dreams now, beckoning him with eyes of fire. The resistance planned an attack on the monastery, but ISF had other intentions. He remembered a path behind the chapel, one the priests had blocked with stones and crosses. He would go alone, find her, and end whatever madness had claimed her soul. Or die trying. Krieg stood before the altar, transfixed. The first flame opened its eyes, orbs of molten gold that saw through time. It spoke without moving its jaw, a voice that cracked stone and minds alike. You were the blood of the wolf, child of steel. Will you serve me or feed me? Krieg, trembling, fell to one knee, whispering oaths in tongues long dead. He offered the bones of his men, his faith, even his name. The flame accepted. Krieg screamed as it entered him, filling him with fire and vision. Magda shattered the attic window with a single scream. Flames erupted around her, licking the walls without consuming them. Her skin glowed like coals, her eyes twin torches. She stepped through the fire barefoot, untouched, descending into the street like a goddess from some pagan myth. The villagers watched in silence, some weeping, some falling to their knees. The Ember Bride had come. And with her, the forest followed, roots tearing through cobblestone, trees erupting from soil. The monastery trembled. Stones cracked, mortar wept blood. ISF reached the hidden passage just as the earth split open behind him, swallowing the chapel whole. He ran through the dark with only a torch and desperation to guide him. Each step closer to Magda filled him with dread and longing. He could hear her song now, a lullaby of seduction and sorrow. He no longer knew if he came to save her, or be saved by her. Beneath the crypt, Krieg rose anew. His flesh steamed, his veins alight. He was no longer merely a man but a vessel. The first flame looked through his eyes now, and the world it saw was ripe for burning. Above, Magda smiled as fire danced through her hair. She whispered a name no living tongue could utter. The ground answered. The trees bent. The war cried out. And the mountain groaned with ancient hunger, opening its maw for what would come next. And far beyond the forest, in the catacombs of a forgotten city, something else stirred, something jealous of the flame, something cold and waiting. The balance had been broken. And a reckoning was coming. Chapter 3, The Ember Bride. Magda stood atop the village well, flames writhing around her like living serpents. Her skin shimmered with ember glow, her eyes pools of liquid gold. The townsfolk, bewitched or broken, knelt at her feet, whispering her name in reverence and dread. From the shadows of shattered houses, black-robed figures emerged. Once villagers, now acolytes of the flame. She spoke in a voice that was not hers alone, a chorus of past priestesses of soil and fire. The old world ends tonight, she declared. From our ashes, the true light shall be born. Krieg's transformation continued within the crypt, his bones cracking to accommodate the divine presence. His skin split in runes, glowing with molten intensity. The flame spoke through him, commanding the structure to bend, stone and time alike. His soldiers fled or worshipped, too late to choose their fate. One lieutenant shot himself as Krieg turned toward him, smile incandescent with madness. The altar pulsed, fed by blood and belief, and from it rose a new kind of warlord, part man, part myth. ISF wandered the ruins of the chapel passage, torch flickering against walls slick with unnatural dew. He no longer felt hunger or fatigue. Only the need to reach Magda pulsed in his chest, as if his heart were bound to hers. Her song called him deeper, laced now with sorrow. The deeper he went, the more he remembered. Childhood games near the monastery, the old woman who warned them never to touch the forest stones, the forbidden book he once burned and now saw etched in every surface. He had always been meant to return. The forest was alive and it marched. Trees uprooted themselves, crawling like beasts on clawed roots. Roots writhed through soil and flesh alike, penetrating cellars, wells and graves. Verasti disappeared under a canopy of lustful shadow. The flames will reshape the land, replacing order with wild worship. In the village square, Magda summoned a throne of roots and bones. She sat, exhaling steam scented with blood orange and cinder. She called her followers to offer their flesh, and they did joyfully. From the capital, Nazi command sent reinforcements to quell the insurrection. Trains loaded with soldiers and tanks rolled toward the mountains, but the land rebelled. Tracks twisted. Machines stalled. Men screamed of visions, flaming women, forests whispering secrets, a fire that knew their names. Radios broadcast static that formed chants when reversed. The Reich's power shattered not with gunfire, but with forgotten magic rising to reclaim its place in the world. Krieg emerged from the monastery, wreathed in holy flame, body a cathedral of scars and light. He called himself the flame-bearer now, herald of purification. His path left scorched earth and melted steel. Villagers who resisted were immolated. Those who submitted were reborn in ash and hunger. Yet even he bowed before Magda, the Ember Bride, the chosen consort of the flame. In her presence he knelt, lips to soil, vowing his eternal flame to hers. Magda's power grew with each night. She wandered dreams as a lover and prophetess, planting thoughts in generals, in mothers, in children yet unborn. Her body became the altar, her blood the incense. She remembered now what she had once been, a vessel, a conduit, a daughter of fire cast down in mortal flesh to awaken the sleeping god. Her longing for ISF twisted within her, equal parts desire and doom. He was the last thread to her former self. He had to choose, burn or flee. In the crypt, the bones began to sing. Not metaphor but melody, deep, echoing choral notes that resonated with memory and madness. The flame no longer needed worship. It demanded sacrifice. Krieg orchestrated rituals, binding souls to trees, forging weapons from teeth and regret. The world was changing, epic by epic in a single breath. And at the heart of it, Magda wept. For the child she had been, for the love she would lose, for the fire that could not be tamed. ISF reached the village as dawn broke, the sky bruised and unnatural. Ash snowed from above. He saw her on the throne, more goddess than girl, and fell to his knees. Their eyes met, and the air thickened with heat. Her smile was sadness wrapped in seduction. "You came," she whispered, voice cracking mountains. He rose slowly. Around him, roots coiled, waiting for her command. But she hesitated. Somewhere deep inside, Magda still remembered his kiss. And far across the continent, in secret rooms lit by candle and fear, others felt the shift. Cults awakened. Temples long buried cracked open. And the one beneath the ice, the one who hated the flame, stirred in bitter cold. War had birthed monsters, but only one would survive the coming eclipse. Chapter 4, Ashes and Ice. The sky over Verasti darkened into perpetual dusk, clouds of ash blotting out the sun. Cold winds slithered down from the north, fighting the spread of flame with a vengeance that felt sentient. Snow returned, not natural but sharp and spectral, flakes like fragments of bone. In the mountains beyond the village, the glacier known as Brachel Morchelui cracked open. From its depths, a figure cloaked in frost and shadows stepped into the lightless day. Eyes like hollow moons, breath like winter's scream. It had waited long for the flame's return. Magda felt the presence before it reached the village. A chill that gnawed at her flame, a name unspoken but remembered in every flicker. The ice had awakened. She rose from her throne, her body wrapped in flame-draped robes that shifted with every breath. "He comes," she murmured, and the forest hissed in anger. She summoned her sentinels, once men now bound to bark and blaze, and sent them east to delay what could not be stopped. She feared nothing, but she knew the ancient balance must be paid in full. Isf stood beside her now, no longer just a man but something in between. Her kiss had marked him, given him a fragment of the flame's power. He moved through fire without pain, yet ice stirred terror in his bones. He heard whispers of prophecy in every gust. "He is your opposite," Magda said softly, tracing his chest with glowing fingers. "But not your enemy. Not yet." Isf didn't understand. All he knew was that whatever came from that glacier wanted her extinguished. Krieg watched the sky turn silver and trembled. The first flame pulsed erratically within him, a rhythm disturbed by ancient dread. He remembered a passage from the flayed tome. "The flame burns bright, but ice remembers." He sent word to Berlin. None replied. His followers, once fervent, now whispered of cold dreams and songs sung backward in their sleep. Something old, something cruel, older even than fire. He fortified the monastery with bone and glyph, praying fire would not betray him too. The being from the glacier, the Pale King, reached the outskirts of the village as night fell. Wherever he walked, the land froze. Trees turned to crystal and shattered. Rivers ran backward, thick with black ice. He did not speak. He did not burn. His presence alone snuffed candles across Europe. The villagers fled, but were caught in frozen mid-motion, statues of agony beneath a snowfall of silence. Only Magda and Isf remained standing, wrapped in the heart of the flame. Magda stepped forward to confront him, flames blooming from her hands. "You are not welcome here," she declared. The Pale King tilted his head, examining her with eyes devoid of mercy. He raised one skeletal hand and the fire dimmed. The trees moaned. The flame within her flickered, not in fear but in recognition. He spoke at last, voiced the sound of cracking ice. "You woke before your time, Ember. The world is not ready for light. Only sleep." Their clash was not of swords but elements. Flame and frost collided with roars that split the sky. Forests turned to steam, rivers to fog. Isf joined the fray, his blood ignited by love and purpose. He struck with fireborn blades, singing prayers of warmth and defiance. Yet for every strike, the Pale King absorbed tenfold, wrapping the world in suffocating stillness. Magda began to falter. Her strength waned. Her power incomplete. She needed more. Beneath the monastery, the first flame screamed. Krieg, now a monster of charred vision, burned brighter than ever. He reached into the flame, demanding its full might. The flame resisted. It was not meant for one alone. But Krieg had no room for failure. He severed the bond with his humanity, becoming a living inferno. He burst through the monastery gates, trailing fire and fury, rushing to Magda's side. "Together," he growled, "we burn the frost to memory." The Pale King stumbled under their joined assault. The flame surged, turning snow to scalding mist. But with his retreat came prophecy. He carved words into the ice with his own fingers. "Light alone invites darkness. The burnt bride shall weep alone." Then like fog he vanished, leaving behind frost so deep it groaned. The village was gone. The monastery collapsed. Only scorched stone and frozen roots remained. And deep in the earth, something new stirred, neither flame nor ice but shadow made from both. It laughed in silence, fed by prophecy. The war was not yet over. It had only begun. Chapter 5. The Thing Without Flame. The earth where the monastery once stood cracked and pulsed like bruised flesh. From the deepest rift, smoke rose, not from fire but from shadow, thick and glistening like oil. In its core, something crawled upward, faceless, limb-tangled, a mass of mouths that never opened. It bore neither heat nor cold. It was not born of flame or ice, but of what they left behind. The villagers who remained heard it first in dreams, a voice without sound, murmuring questions with no words. Fear returned like blood to a frozen limb. Magda awoke screaming, sweat slick on skin that no longer burned. Her flame dimmed, her eyes fogged. The spiral mark throbbed, now tainted with tendrils of black. She knew this wasn't the Pale King. It was older, more primal, a wound in the world's spine. "It watches," she whispered. Isf held her close, but his warmth was distant, dulled. Even Krieg, now reduced to a cinder-skinned prophet, warned her, "The flame rejects it. It is not part of the old balance. It is hunger." At the sight of the glacier, the Pale King stood still as a monument, eyes fixed southward. He felt the presence but did not move to confront it. Ice remembered all, and this thing had no memory, no story, no name. That terrified him. His court of frost priests wept tears of crystal, proclaiming the thaw had ended. Winter could not contain what had never lived. He whispered one name into the air, Magda, and turned away, vanishing into his cold eternity. Magda, desperate for answers, led Isf and Krieg deep beneath the monastery ruins. They followed ancient catacombs carved by hands not human, where torches refused to light and walls whispered with voices of unborn gods. At the deepest chamber, a mirror of obsidian pulsed like a heart. It showed not reflections but futures, each worse than the last. Krieg dropped to his knees, bleeding from the eyes. Magda reached out and the mirror cracked. The thing noticed. In cities far beyond the war, plagues of shadow began. Sleepwalkers murmured in languages no one taught them. Rivers reversed course. Children were born without eyes, but with the spiral mark etched into their spines. The Vatican declared a state of silent prayer. Berlin went dark for 6 nights. London's skies filled with silent birds that screamed only once, just before dying mid-air. Something was breaking, a tear across the continent. And all strings led back to Verasti. Isf, seeing Magda unravel, sought an alliance with the frost. He climbed north, past the dead forests and shattered roads, to the edge of Brachel Morchelui. There he offered his flame in trade, not for power but for balance. The pale king appeared, more spirit than flesh, and listened. What awakens beneath, Isf said, it comes for both of you. For a moment, frost and fire shared silence. Then the pale king extended his hand. A pact was made. Magda remained in the village ruins, wrapped in scorched cloth, her body growing colder by the hour. The throne of roots had rotted into slime. Her followers lost themselves in madness, consumed by the unnameable. She meditated in the ashes of her power, waiting for Isf's return, but the voice crept closer, slithering through cracks in her thoughts. It did not seduce, it invaded. It did not promise, it demanded. And her body began to respond. Krieg, sensing the decay of fire's dominion, turned fully to prophecy. He wandered the lands, speaking in riddles, carving spirals into stone and flesh. He called it the coming of the void heart. He was no longer feared, only avoided. But children listened, and some drew what they saw in dreams. A shape like a tear in reality, crowned in ash, haloed in frost. In the north, new cults formed. In the south, the forests turned inward, leaves blackening before spring. As the 5th night without stars descended, Magda stood atop the cracked altar and opened her arms. She sang, not in flame nor in frost but in silence. The song echoed into the deep rift, where the thing without flame waited. For a moment the world held its breath. Then the answer came, not as sound but as pulse. The earth trembled, the sky cracked, and something began to climb. And in a field forgotten by war, a girl with no eyes whispered Magda's name. She smiled, and the spiral opened across her chest like a blooming wound. Chapter 6, The Spiral Choir. The thing without flame climbed from the rift with a silence so dense it collapsed birds mid-flight. Flesh without form, it carried not the memory of creation, but the ache of what never should have been. Every step it took whispered undoings, of time, of name, of light. Trees wilted into ash. Mountains sank by inches. And the air thickened with invisible hymns, the birth song of the spiral choir. It did not conquer. It replaced. Magda stood at the altar, eyes dimmed, body brittle with the erosion of self. Her spiral mark pulsed with opposing forces, one of fire's echo, the other of consuming null. She felt her soul fraying at its edges. The choir sang to her through the rift, and each verse erased another memory. Her mother's face, Isf's lips, the taste of summer bread, all vanishing. Only one thought remained, submit or shatter. Far above, in the ruined highlands, Isf returned with the pale king's frost burning in his veins. The pact gave him clarity but not comfort. He saw the rift like a wound in the world's womb, leaking not blood but potential. He kissed the ground of Verasti and tasted endings. When he saw Magda, his Magda, crumbling on the altar, he screamed her name but no sound reached her. The choir had stolen meaning from sound. Krieg watched from a ridge, spiral-carved eyes gleaming with madness and reverence. It sings to us, he muttered, arms spread. Around him, his followers convulsed, mouths moving in perfect silence. They mimed a mass for the end of all masses. Krieg laughed until he wept, then burned until only his bones stood upright, still humming. Even in death, the spiral wrote its scripture in marrow. Magda turned her gaze to Isf at last, and something flickered. The spiral paused. The choir missed a note. In that stutter, fire bloomed again in her eyes. She did not smile. She did not speak. But she reached out. ISF ran, ice and heat merging in his stride. When he touched her, the spiral recoiled. The mark flared white-hot, burning black tendrils away. The choir shrieked, not in anger but in confusion. It had not expected resistance. Together they leapt into the rift. Inside was neither hell nor void, but a chamber of infinite reflections. Every wall shimmered with possible worlds. Magda as queen, as corpse, as child unborn. ISF bleeding, ISF burning, ISF gone. The choir hovered above them as a vast polyphonic organ, throats upon throats reciting futures. Magda felt herself fracturing again. "Don't forget me," she said, voice trembling. ISF gripped her tighter. "I never learned how." The spiral surged, attempting to overwrite them with versions more compliant. But their bond proved immune. Each memory they shared fought back. First kiss, shared blood, whispered fears in ruined cellars. These became weapons. Magda screamed their wedding that never was. ISF shouted the names of children they would never meet. The spiral cracked. Its song grew dissonant. Outside, the cults faltered. Across the continent, statues wept salt water. The Vatican's windows shattered from prayers too loud. In Berlin, dead radios hissed lullabies. The spiral choir's reach broke like old chains. Light returned, weak, wounded, but real. Fires kindled without tongues. Snow fell without screams. And deep in the rift, the spiral shrieked its final note. When Magda and ISF emerged, they bore scars neither flame nor frost could explain. The rift sealed behind them with a sigh. Above, the stars blinked as if returning from exile. Magda touched her spiral mark, now dormant, not gone. "It's not over," she said. ISF nodded, his breath fogging the dawn. "No. But now we remember how to fight." Chapter 7. The Pale Accord. Snow returned to Verasti in gentle flurries, covering the ruins like a shroud. The village, half swallowed by earth and ash, stood still in mourning. The spiral was silenced, but echoes lingered in cracks and crevices, waiting. Magda walked through the remnants, barefoot, feeling frost kiss her ankles. She no longer burned. Her power was not gone but transformed, subtle, introspective, uncertain. ISF followed close, ever her shadow, his breath thick and visible in the early light. In the highlands, the pale king watched their return from afar. His form was indistinct, more silhouette than substance, but his eyes glowed with reserved approval. ISF's pact still held, a thread of frost tethering him to the north. The king sent a messenger, an iceborn wraith with lips sealed by frozen stitches. It carried a crystal shard to Magda, which shimmered with images of possible futures. She watched in silence, then shattered it. "No fate," she said. "Only choice." Survivors began to emerge from hiding, dazed and reverent. Some had hidden in mountains, others beneath floorboards, others in the fog of madness. They gathered around Magda and ISF like pilgrims. The Ember Bride had become legend. Yet Magda no longer sought worship. She asked for names, for stories. She listened. And each tale she heard became a stone laid into a path forward, a village reborn, not ruled. Krieg's bones stood unclaimed atop the ridge, humming still. One boy dared touch them and visions poured into his mind, warnings, symbols, fire, scream. He painted what he saw, a wheel with 3 spokes, flame, frost, and void. The villagers began carving the symbol into their homes, not out of fear but remembrance. History would not be erased again. The spiral's lessons, though bitter, would not be wasted. In Berlin, scholars and survivors convened in secret. They translated fragments of Krieg's ravings, cross-referenced Vatican silences, and decoded the bird screams from London. A pattern emerged. The spiral was only a harbinger. Something deeper, older, slept beneath the world's skin. They called it the root. And it too had begun to stir. Magda felt this in her dreams, roots crawling beneath her veins, whispering in voices she didn't yet understand. ISF held her through each night terror, never asking for explanation. He carried frost in his blood, but it kept her grounded. The world above healed slowly, scars visible but life pulsing anew. The war still raged elsewhere, but here for the first time fire and ice had made peace. The Pale King arrived on the first day of true spring, unannounced, his presence lowering the temperature without extinguishing hope. Magda met him alone at the stone circle where her flame first woke. No words passed between them. They exchanged memories instead, hers of flame-born agony, his of glacial patience. When they parted, A single blossom of white fire bloomed in the snow. Was a treaty. A new monastic order rose, not of gods but of guardians. Flame-bearers and frostwalkers trained together, bound by oath to remember and protect. Children learned the spiral as a symbol, not a threat. They sang of balance. Some called Magda a saint. She never corrected them. But she lit every shrine herself, and placed a shard of frost beside each flame. ISF watched the village become a haven. He taught survival, poetry, resistance. He built their new library with his hands and filled it with pages of what had been. One day he wrote down their story, not to glorify but to warn. On the final page he left no ending. Only a spiral. And far to the west, where bombs still fell and nations screamed, a girl with no name drew the same spiral in ash. She smiled and the ground beneath her smiled back. Chapter 8, The Root Below. Deep beneath the earth where no light could reach, the root stirred. It was not a creature but a will, a pulse, a memory etched into the bones of the world. It had no name, no beginning, no allegiance to flame or frost. Where it passed, reality rippled. Its tendrils fed not on life but on belief. And the war, with all its death and desperation, had made the soil fertile with fear. Now it reached for the surface. In Verasti the villagers felt it as unease. Walls creaked with no wind. Fire refused to stay lit. Babies cried in unison at the stroke of midnight. Magda felt it strongest. Her dreams turned sour, visions no longer hers. The spiral no longer whispered, it screamed. ISF awoke one night to find her standing in the field, hand buried in the soil, eyes rolled white. She muttered in a language older than fire. He dragged her back inside, heart pounding. The flame-bearers and frostwalkers convened in the old chapel ruins, where flame danced and frost clung in uneasy peace. Their leaders debated the signs. Some wanted to flee, others to pray. But one girl, barely 13, eyes marked with twin spirals, stood and said, "It wants to be heard." Her name was Miri and she had never spoken before. The elders listened. The girl knew things, rituals lost to time, symbols long buried. And she knew where to go, the hollow tree. The hollow tree stood at the edge of the forest, older than the village, older than the monastery. No one dared approach it. Animals refused to pass its roots. But now Magda, ISF, and a small band of flame and frost entered its shadow. The bark pulsed beneath their fingers. They carved the spiral and the tree opened like a mouth. The path led down. Beneath the hollow tree was a world forgotten. Fungal towers, bioluminescent rivers, air heavy with memory. Here time pulsed differently. They walked for what felt like days. Miri led them without fear. Magda felt her spiral react, not with pain but resonance. This place was the root's domain. And it was awake. They reached a chamber of bones, human, beast, god. At its center grew the heart root, a massive knot of wood pulsating with black and red veins. It spoke without sound, pressing thoughts into their skulls. You forget the first war. We remember. Flame burns. Ice sleeps. But we remain. It offered a choice. Destroy the root and risk the balance, or bind with it and risk corruption. Magda stepped forward. She saw visions, endless cycles of rise and fall, of gods born and broken, of spirals repeating across time. She understood now, they were echoes, not beginnings. What if we remember differently? She asked. The root hesitated. For the first time it questioned itself. ISF placed his frost-marked hand on hers. Miri joined them, uniting spiral, flame, and frost. Together they channeled memory, not as a weapon but as offering. The root pulsed, convulsed, then quieted. The heart root stopped beating. In its place grew a blossom, black petals rimmed with fire and frost. Balance. When they returned, the hollow tree had vanished. The spiral mark on Magda's body faded to a scar. The village breathed easier. The skies cleared. And the world once again turned. But in a ruined cathedral far away, Krieg's bones crumbled to dust. From beneath them, something laughed, a voice not of root, nor flame, nor frost. A fourth element, long banished, now stirred. Chapter 9, The Fourth Mouth. The laugh echoed through the cathedral ruins like thunder wrapped in oil. Dust lifted, and from the floor a shape began to rise, not born of fire, nor carved by frost, nor seated in root. It was absence with intent, hunger with memory. The fourth mouth, as it would come to be called, had no flesh. Only desire. Its presence inverted prayer and turned light inward. The spiral trembled in Magda's scar. Balance had birthed a new hunger. Far away in Verasti, Magda woke gasping. She touched her scar and felt it pulse backward. ISF held her, but she was already standing, already listening. The sky outside twisted, stars dimming one by one. "It's not an element," she said. "It's the gap. The thing we left behind." Miri stood in the doorway, her twin spirals darkened to black. "It knows us." It made the spiral possible. Flamebearers and frostwalkers marched to the chapel again. The blossom they had planted in the root's chamber had withered. It bled black ichor now, and every drop sang in the voice of Krieg. His words returned, scrambled, fractured, prophetic. "The mouth opens where silence feeds," they chanted, unbidden. It was not a warning. It was an invitation. The mouth did not move through space. It unfolded realities. Cities found themselves mirrored wrong, time stuttered, children aged in reverse. In Paris, statues bled from their eyes. In Moscow, the sun set and refused to rise again. Across Europe, those who had once heard the spiral now heard only a deep, unrelenting hunger. Magda led her allies toward the ruined cathedral, following the pulse of imbalance. The journey twisted them, paths bent, nights lengthened. ISF found he could not remember his mother's name. Miri's feet bled black, but she never slowed. "It wants us to forget," she whispered. "It thrives where meaning dies." They reached the cathedral on the 13th night. Inside they found a congregation of shadows. The bones of Krieg were gone, but his outline remained, etched into stone like a warning. The mouth floated above the altar, a sphere of warped space that bent voices and thought. Magda approached, flame flaring weakly. The mouth responded, not with attack but with curiosity. "You carry memory," it said. "Give it to me." She refused. Instead she offered a story, hers, ISF's, the village, the wars, the root. Every word weakened the mouth. It recoiled from meaning, from structure. ISF joined in, reciting their shared moments, their broken futures. Miri spoke the spiral's origin in rhyme. The mouth shook. Its surface cracked. It could consume emptiness but not truth. The mouth screamed, not sound but erasure. Memories vanished across the world. But Magda fought back, planting new stories, carving names into the ground, speaking her truth in every tongue she knew. The mouth shrank, folding into itself. She pressed her scar against it. The spiral flared, and for one breath, the world remembered everything. Then silence. And in that silence, a choice: forget and be safe, or remember and risk awakening something worse. Magda looked to ISF, then to Miri. "We remember," she said. The mouth was gone. But it had left its echo. One more chapter remained. Chapter 10. Embers of the World. Magda stood at the edge of the cathedral ruins, watching the sun rise for the first time in what felt like lifetimes. Light touched the blackened stones, and for a moment, everything was still. ISF placed his hand in hers. Miri stood on the altar steps, her spirals faded to gray. The mouth was gone, its echo fading, but its challenge lingered. They had remembered. Now they had to decide what to do with that memory. Across Europe, survivors woke with fragments of foreign lives. Dreams not their own, memories of things that had not happened yet. Histories blurred. Some went mad. Others found strength. Churches and barracks alike filled with whispers. The spiral was no longer a mark but a question. What truth will you carry forward? And for the first time, humanity was alone with that choice. Back in Verasti, the village rebuilt again. The flamebearers and frostwalkers planted gardens instead of altars. The hollow tree did not return, but new growth sprang from the crater it left. Children played among the roots, drawing spirals in the dirt without fear. Magda taught them to listen to stories, not for answers but for echoes. Miri began writing the first book of what she called the Remembering. ISF traveled far, spreading not doctrine but questions. He told stories in bombed-out cities, in whispered cafes by refugee fires. Some laughed. Some cried. Some listened. He never asked them to believe, only to remember. And as he moved, he mapped the spread of stories, finding where silence still lingered, and where it might return. The Pale King was never seen again. But on nights of heavy frost, Magda would look to the mountains and feel a calm, a truce held in breath. Balance was not peace but motion. And motion meant the spiral would always turn. She did not fear it now. She had named it. She had defied it. And in doing so, she had made it part of her. Krieg's final prophecy was carved into stone near the cathedral. Where memory ends, meaning begins. Where truth breaks, stories bind. No one claimed to understand it fully. But every new settlement placed their shrine beside it, lit with flame and cooled with frost, guarded not by warriors but by witnesses. One night, Magda stood alone in the field where the war began. She whispered the names of the lost. The spiral glowed faintly in her palm, no longer a wound but a sigil. She pressed it to the soil. From it, a single flower bloomed, black and white, fire and ice. No gods, she said. Only the stories we choose to keep. The world changed slowly. But it changed. Empires fell. Borders redrew. And in forgotten corners, people began to speak in verse again, to leave room for silence, to listen for echoes in stone. The mouth had been an end, but also a beginning. The fourth element was not hunger. It was choice. Years later, a child found a hidden journal beneath the altar of the old cathedral. It was Miri's. The last page read, "When they ask how the world was saved, tell them it wasn't. Tell them we remembered it into something else." And as the sun rose once more over the blackened forest, the spiral turned, never the same, never still, always remembering.